All right, all. Now that we have a basic understanding of how to set up a composition, how to import content, from your properties panel or your project panel into the composition and place it using the selection tool, the rotation tool. Let's talk about actually adding motion, right? This is motion graphics after all, but there hasn't really been any motion yet, right? So let's talk about that. I don't know if you guys have taken a animation course. I recommend taking the 10A, which is 2D animation course, or animation basics, I guess they would call it. And if you take that course, you will learn about what's called frame by frame animation. Frame by frame is where you literally animate frame to frame to frame to frame, which is you would animate if I'm like Mickey Mouse or some character and I'm doing this as the action, you would animate frame to frame to frame to frame to frame to frame. Okay. Now, there's something called a keyframe. Let's explain where that concept or that term comes from. So, back when there were animation studios in Burbank, California, this is under like Disney back in like the 30s and all that. You had a lot of animators and you had like levels of animators, hierarchy, if you will. Okay. You had the key animators, and then you had what were called in-between animators. Usually, key animators were older, more veteran animators, and they would draw the key or the important poses. So once again, if the action is this, the key animator would usually do the beginning and then the end. And then it was up to the in-between animators who were usually like kind of the lower levels, newbies, if you will, to do all the in-between drawings. So they would do this, 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 and then this. Okay. So, what After Effects allows you to do is to be the key animator. In other words, if let's say, for the sake of argument, I want this car to go, I want to add some motion and I want it to go from the left side of the screen to the right side. Okay. So if this was a frame by frame animation, I'd have to animate this, all the way through. But what keyframe animation lets me do is basically give the key poses. The key poses are, okay, if my car is going from the left to the right, a key pose would be at the beginning and at the end. Okay. And then what'll happen in this case is After Effects will handle all the in-between work. All right. So what am I trying to do here? I'm trying to have a car go from the left side of the screen to the right side. Let's actually like literally write this out. Action. Car goes from the left side of the screen to the right side. Okay. So the start pose or the beginning pose is, where does it start? Well, it starts on the left side. Car is on left. And the end pose is, where does it end up? Well, in this case, the car is going to end up on the right side. Car is on the right. So this is all well and good, but how do we actually do this in After Effects? So let's go back, and we have a timeline here. Okay. We haven't really used the timeline, but this blue marker here represents my time mark, where we are in time. Okay. And the way it works is, this is my composition. If you want to see more or less of your timeline, you can use the zoom feature here. And it's showing the length of my composition, which is about 5 seconds. And you can see that it's actually measuring out frames. So this is 15 frames, 1 second, 115. So in other words, this is like half a second, 1 second, 1.5 seconds, 2 seconds, so on and so on. This is the beginning, this is the middle, this is the end. What I'm going to do is take my time marker, which is where we currently are in time, and I'm going to drag it all the way to the left because I want my animation to start on the left. Then what I'm going to do is grab the car, or highlight it, and I'm just going to use the selection tool to place it wherever I want. I want it to start on the left. If you want to be really specific, you can hit P and then kind of like micro adjust it as such. Okay. Now using this property is the main thing because right to the left of it, there's this thing that kind of looks like an old school stopwatch. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that just once. And when I do that, a couple things happen. This turns blue. The property, the position property turns blue. And if I take my time marker and I move it, I'm going to see a little diamond shape. That diamond shape, what it really represents is at this point in time, this object, which in this case is the car, is going to be at this particular location, 100 in the X direction and 251 in the Y direction. Okay. So this is like, think of this as like a saved point. Now I'm going to go ahead 3 seconds. I'm just choosing 3 arbitrarily. You can make it whatever you want. And what I'm going to do is take this and I'm going to move it. Now you can move it by using the selection tool. I could also change the X value, but I'm just going to drag it like this. Okay. Now what you're going to notice is once you have one keyframe, anytime you move your object or in time and then move your object physically in terms of either position or scale or rotation, it's going to automatically add a new keyframe. So I have one keyframe, 2 keyframes, or in other words, start pose, end pose. Car starts at the left, car ends at the right. Okay. What I'm going to do now is play this back. You can play it back. If you have this little preview menu here, if you don't get that, you can go under Window Preview or hit Spacebar is the keyboard shortcut to play your animation. Make sure the timeline is selected. And there you go. The car is moving. It's moving from the left side to the right side. Okay. Now, let's just say for the sake of argument, I decide later on, you know what? I don't want the car to go from the left to the right. I want it to go from maybe the top to the bottom. Okay. It's still changing its position, just it's starting in a different location and it's ending in a different location. Okay. Since the keyframes are really the saved point, they represent the information given to After Effects. And if you update this information, After Effects will update all of the movement. So what I'm going to do is take my time marker and place it right above the keyframe. Okay. A couple ways you can tell you're literally the little blue lines going through it. Another way to tell is if you see this, that means that we're above a keyframe. And what I'm going to do is take this and move it. Okay. So what I've done is I've basically edited this keyframe. Its original position point was here, and now I've changed it to there. And now I'm going to move forward to the other one. Another way to do this is you can actually use this to jump between keyframes, these little arrows. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to click on it and edit it. And now it's at the bottom. So by repositioning or editing the keyframes, I play this back. Now, instead of going from the left to the right, it goes from the top to the bottom. Okay. Now, at any point, let's just say for the sake of argument, I didn't like the keyframes I added. If you actually click back on this stopwatch, it'll actually delete all of your keyframes. So there would be no more movement to your character. So I click on this. Notice how there's no more movement. Okay. So don't click on this unless you actually want to delete all your keyframes. All right. So that was position. Let's do the same thing here. This is my, oops, character. Sorry, I'm just checking what I wanted you guys to do here. Yeah, we'll do the same thing. Okay. All right, I'm gonna take the balloon. Let's put it here. Okay, this is my composition. And let's just kind of, once again, let's do an action. What am I trying to have do? I want the balloon to go from the bottom of the screen to the top of the screen. Okay. Where does my start pose, or where does the, action start? Well, balloon is on the bottom. What is the end pose? Balloon is on the top. All right, how are we going to do this? Well, let's take my time marker, put it at the beginning, and I'm going to put this at the bottom. Let's hit P to bring up my position, and I want to save this position in time at the 0 mark. How do we do that? We click on stopwatch. That's going to add the keyframe, the little diamond. And then what I'm going to do is let's move forward 2 seconds-ish. I can either drag it. Another way to do this is you can actually type in the time code here. So if I did 200, that should get me exactly at 2 seconds. And what I'm going to do is take this and I'm going to move it up as such. Because we've already set one keyframe, once you've turned on the stopwatch, anytime you click on your character and move it or change another property, it's automatically going to keyframe it for you. So I get something like that. I mentioned before about changing keyframes. So what I'm going to do is hit P to look at my keyframes. So I have 2 keyframes here, one at 0 and one at 5 seconds. It's, my character starting at the bottom and going to the top. If I wanted to change that, I want to make sure you're on top of the keyframe. Easiest way, in my opinion, is use these markers, because that'll automatically jump you to the next keyframe or the previous keyframe. I'm above that, I can tell because of that blue little diamond there. And I'm going to click on him and move him here because I'm going to have him go this direction. Then I'm going to click on the final one, click and move. So I've reset drawings of my character, or the movement of my character. Okay. And it's pretty much this simple. It's really, you figure out the direction and then you figure out how long is the action going to take. In this case, the character is going from here to here over 5 seconds. In the previous one, the balloon went from the bottom to the top in about 2 seconds. Let's do one more. All right, we talked about rotation, right? Well, let's animate rotation. So what I want to do, let's talk about action again. Arrow will rotate 180 degrees. Okay. 180 is basically like a half turn. So the start pose, arrow starts at 90, which is like means it's pointing to the right, I believe. Yep. In this case, the arrow defaults. Technically, it's at 0. So let's say 0. I know it's a little confusing what that means here, but and then end pose, arrow ends at 180. So how do we do this? Well, here's my arrow. If I hit R, remember that pulls up in rotation, and this is my degrees. I'm going to start it at 0. That's its default. Its default is pointing to the right. And let's click here on the stopwatch. Now in this time, I'm not animating the position, but instead I'm animating the rotation. Okay, so it's not going to move the arrow around the page, but it is going to rotate it. Now I'm going to go to 2 seconds. And I'm going to change this from 0 to 180 degrees. And so what's happened now is you can see I have 2 keyframes, one at 0. At the beginning, it's at 0 degrees. At 2 seconds, it's at 180. Or in other words, what's going to happen is my arrow is going to animate 180 degrees over 2 seconds. So let's play this back. I'm going to go here, hit spacebar. Okay. Oops. Don't worry about what this is. I don't want to talk about this right now. Oops. All right. So that did a, 180-degree turn or a half turn. What if I wanted my arrow to spin one full rotation or maybe even two rotations? Well, this over here, so this is degrees, this is the number of rotations. So what I'm going to do is let's take this and I'm going to jump forward. And rather than going 180 degrees, I'm going to set that to 0. And I'm going to set this to 1. What this means is between my two keyframes, this is going to rotate one full rotation, which would be 360 degrees. So if I press play, you can see it goes one full rotation. Okay. If I wanted to do two rotations, I could click here, set this to 2. Oops. Let's go back and make sure. Let's set this to 2 rotations. And now it does 2 rotations before stopping. Okay. All right, why don't you guys try that out? That was in the exercises I gave you. That was 6, 7, 8, and 9, please.